Hey, welcome back to the Lead Counsel Podcast. Your host, Tom Tona. Before we jump into today's topic, I just want to take a minute to thank the sponsors of the podcast. This episode is sponsored by Tona Law. They're not just another law firm. They're defining what it means to fight for their clients. We get a lot of attorney referrals from across the country. We pay fee participation in all jurisdictions where it's permitted. We focus on integrity, innovation, and relentless advocacy. Tona Law is proving that the business of law can scale without losing its heart. If you want to see how a modern firm is built for impact and happy client referrals, check out tonalaw.com. Mention again the Lead Counsel Podcast, and I'm happy to get on the phone with you. I am joined today by Kellam Parks. Kellam is a cybersecurity attorney out of Virginia. The name of the firm is Parks Ziegler. And I can tell you that every time there's a cybersecurity incident I've been made aware of, Kellam's name gets thrown into the ring. So Kellam, how are you?
I'm good, Tom. I appreciate the kind intro. But yeah, it's a thing for sure, man. For sure.
Yeah. So, I was kind of giving you a little bit of a lead in, and what I'm going to do is share two stories with you that will kind of draw awareness to why I was like, I got to get you on the podcast. So one, a New York firm that I know, a very, very significant personal injury firm, had their in-house server hacked, which, why anybody would want to house their own server at this point is beyond me, but they had their in-house server hacked and had to pay $500,000 ransom, right? Now, luckily they had insurance. They were down for a week. I'm not sure if they were reimbursed that week, but if you have a firm that's doing what I know the numbers they were doing, let's say that they're a $80 million law firm, do the math on what those 5 days down did on top of the payroll and everything else. It is significant. I would estimate it's over $1 million a week in revenue. So let's say that was impacted, $500,000 for ransom, then the carrying costs of the staff for those 5 days. They've got a massive staff. You're talking about probably in an area of, almost $2 million, let's ballpark, in losses that they had insurance, not sure how much was covered or not, but that's just one scenario. And then you and I met because a close friend of mine got hacked. One of his paralegals left the door open on something technologically, and he had immediate response because I helped him find you. He called somebody who was local to him in another state. I think he ended up going with that lawyer. That still cost him north of $50,000 just for the remedial steps of what he had to do once the breach occurred.
Sure.
So most of my listeners on this podcast are lawyers, and you have a guide that I actually downloaded. What's the name of the guide that you give for free on your website?
Yeah, it's just a cybersecurity guide for law firms. And I basically created a guide where the first half is talking about how to vet and find a good IT vendor that knows cybersecurity. And then the second half is talking about, how to lock yourself down and how to plan, including insurance, which is critical.
Yeah. So regardless of firm size, I think that this becomes a critical issue for a topic for discussion. I also knowing a bit about HIPAA because I have a tech company that specializes in HIPAA consulting, right? My CIO is a high-level HIPAA compliance certified by the federal government. And she said almost every law firm that we talk to is going to have issues with that as well. So I only see enforcement from the federal government increasing because it's a huge source of revenue. But I also think these cybersecurity threats go hand in hand with this stuff, right? Like HIPAA compliance, all of that stuff.
Yeah, sure. And it's interesting. So, as a cybersecurity attorney, I do two main things. One is incident response. So I'm hired for Virginia and North Carolina where we're licensed. I do the actual incident response. So if you get hacked, you can hire me and I can help do all the legal stuff to make sure that you're compliant and doing what you have to do. And then a lot of what I do is planning, which is really more consulting. And so I can do that anywhere. I've got clients all over the United States, got one in Canada, where I just do the planning to say, hey, let's do a data breach avoidance plan, an incident response plan, and a tech policy, all the stuff you need to lock your stuff down. But I mention that because part of it is HIPAA, right? So I represent a lot of doctors, dentists, medical device companies, and law firms usually only are impacted by HIPAA if they're adjacent. So it's a business associate agreement. Because the only way that you're subject to HIPAA is if you're a healthcare treatment, if you do treatment, if you're a clearinghouse for insurance, or if you're self-insured. So although a lot of law firms like your personal injury firm carry what would be defined as personal health information, you're actually not independently subject to HIPAA. But at the same time, if you're getting information from HIPAA compliant people, you may have to sign a BAA. And so that sort of puts you in that gray area. But regardless, you've got to be locked down. I mean, as a business, we have an ethical obligation, and that's an extra thing, right? So you can lose your license if you're not locked down. And it's a real problem for small and solo firms because they just don't have the knowledge, the money. Usually the larger
Right.
firms, though. I was just on a mutual friend, Jonathan's podcast recently, and we were talking about the big law firm breach. So it happens to the big firms too, but they're usually targeted, right? So these small, medium-sized firms are usually just negligence or an accident. It's not as often that they're hacked as more as it's a social engineering kind of oops kind of thing.
Right. But look, it is there are ethical issues, there are legal issues as far as why you have to protect client data, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
real world consequences of a breach are not just financial, right? What are the other implications for law firms?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes hand in hand, right? So in any business, if you have a cyber incident, it's going to have an impact. So the main thing is, obviously, you want to plan. So if you have the right plans in place and you're locked down, you've minimized the chance something's going to happen, but it's never zero, right? That old joke is, what are the odds of being killed by a cow? It's never zero.
Right.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, I don't care how locked down you are, you're going to have a data, and we call it an incident. So something happens. We call it a breach if there's personal information or personal health information if you're subject to HIPAA, and those are legally defined, right? But you have something happen. You got to investigate it. You got to figure out what's going on. If you have insurance, which everybody should, and everybody should, first of all, have a separate cybersecurity insurance. Don't put a rider. Don't think that your general liability policy is going to do it. You want a separate policy. You want a good policy because they're not standard. So it's not like a malpractice or a general liability or an auto policy. These policies vary wildly as definitions and exclusions. So you want to have a good policy through a good company. But even with that, and retention is usually 5 to 10 grand. So your deductible is relatively low. The insurance is usually not that expensive. So for our firm, we've got 37 people. We've got remote workers. We've got overseas workers. We're in 2 states, and it costs about $3,400 a year for $1 million in coverage. So it's not outrageous at all. But independently of that 5 or 10 grand out of pocket, if something happens, like you said, you've got loss of business, you've got the hassle, you've got the loss of time. A good policy will have business interruption, but then sometimes you got to have an accountant prove all of that. But independently of all of that, you've got the very real ethical obligation to lock down your client confidential information. And every state generally has a reasonable standard. And at least in Virginia, where I'm licensed and I teach ethics and I do a lot of speaking on AI and electronically stored information and cybersecurity, I don't know of any ethical sanctions against an attorney for failing yet. But it's going to come because I have clients. I have small firm and solo clients that when I got hired, it was abysmal. They did not do what I would say is reasonable steps. And so not only can you lose your business, and these small and solo firms if they don't have insurance, it's a 6-figure issue to get into. So that could close you down. But then even if all that's fine, if you haven't taken reasonable steps, you might lose your license. It's just a really big deal.
Yeah, I agree. And here's the other thing I would put out, because I've been to 2 masterminds in the last 3 weeks. And what I don't understand is how people don't have AI policies yet, right? Yeah. AI usage. So just for anybody that's listening to this, it doesn't matter if you have your paralegals using AI, your paralegals are using AI. So if you don't have a policy that says you can only use these platforms in this manner, and just listen, I'm not telling people what to do, but best practices, have a paragraph in your retainer about AI usage where you're explaining to the clients, you have the option to tell us you don't want us using it, or you can consent to our use of it. Here's the impact, but there are risks that come with that, right?
Yeah.
Protect yourself. Spend some money to have somebody like you, like I have my ethics lawyer do it, right? But like as soon as AI came out, I was like, oh, people are going to use this. It's going to get used wrong unless I get ahead of it. So I wanted to dictate the way it gets used, lock down all the other avenues, make sure that it's the paid premium, that gives you the security of a closed system, and have clients waving off on it. Right?
100%. It's very interesting you mentioned that. I just recently, so the Virginia Trial Lawyers Association just had a small firm, solo firm retreat to sort of teach the business of law just last weekend. And so they asked me to come up and speak about AI. And I put together a guide on this. And if you want to throw that in the show notes, I'm happy to give that out for free as well. And
that would be awesome.
Yeah. And I literally say, hey, here are the things you need to think about. Here's some sample language, and you need to put it in your retainer agreement. Just like you said, hey, we use it. You give us permission to use it, which ethically you don't have to do, but it's best policies, right? Secondly, you should put it in a welcome letter to your clients and go, hey, don't use free AI input information because it's not privileged and it's going to give you the wrong information and we're going to have problems. And then you need to have an internal policy, exactly like you said, to say, hey, either we don't use AI or we use AI and here's how we use AI. And it's so funny you said that because that's exactly what came out of my mouth at this presentation was, if you don't think that your staff's using AI, you're wrong. And if you don't have a policy, they make up their own policy. And I guarantee you they're using free ChatGPT or Claude and throwing in client information because they don't know.
Right.
And so you need those three things. And I literally just put together a guide a couple of weeks ago. So I'm happy to share that with your audience as well.
That would be awesome. Any resource you can share, because I think that, like you said, especially for the smaller firms, it's always a challenge to the extent that resources are limited.
Yeah.
Especially sub 500,000 to $1 million, they're very limited. So can somebody afford to have somebody come in and they go, I only have 1 or 2 people. It only takes 1 or 2 people to open the door, right? So, talk
Sure.
about the biggest cyber threats that you see right now facing law firms so that people become aware of the different ways bad actors are getting in.
Sure. Yeah. So look, obviously, the big bad is, you got hacked. That happens, but I will tell you that it doesn't usually happen for small and solo firms because the criminals aren't going to take the time to try to breach you, like physically hack into your system. So what normally happens for most of us is you have a phishing scheme. So an email gets sent to you that it looks like it's from Citibank or it looks like it's from a client or another attorney, but it's not. You click a link. Oh, now they have access to your system, right? So that's sort of the most common way to get into it. Another way is you get an actual email from somebody like another attorney that is an actual email from their system because their system has been actually compromised and they sit and wait. So we had an incident, but not a breach a number of years ago where one of my lawyers got an email from a lawyer that he was expecting to hear from about a document he was expecting to get, and they had a Dropbox link. He clicked the Dropbox link. It turns out it was a fake link because the bad guys had gotten into this attorney's system and just waited. And they knew by reading the emails, hey, this attorney is dealing with it. Let's get into that law firm's system. And luckily, even though they clicked the link and it sort of created an incident, they weren't able to get into our system because of all of our stuff, right? So if we had not had lockdown like we should have been locked down, they absolutely would have co-opted our system. So sometimes it's spear phishing, which is the very targeted to a specific person, just phishing in general, which is sort of these general emails go out. Sometimes you have an actual compromised system. Again, that's pretty rare that somebody gets into your system, but it happens. And a lot of times it's also just carelessness. And this is it, your people, like you need to train them, you need to lock your system down because the people are most often going to be your vulnerability where, they're tired, they're not paying attention, they click, I didn't think about that. Or I had a client one time, they had multi-factor authentication, which you should always have. You got to turn that on for everything.
Everybody complains about it. We do it anyway.
You have to. Like that is the lowest hanging fruit. It's free. It's the lowest hanging fruit to protect yourself. And it's not foolproof, by the way. There are sophisticated ways to get around it, but it'll stop most of it, right? So what happened was somebody was trying to get into somebody's Microsoft 365 account and they kept trying to get in and the person was in a meeting and it was an executive at this company actually. And they kept getting this authenticate. And so after like 6, the guy was like, yes, because he was in the middle of a meeting. And so the bad guys got into the system because he actually, it worked exactly like it should have. The guy hit yes because he was impatient. It happens. You hear that and you go, I can't believe it. It happens all the time. It happens to big companies, small companies. It is absolutely mind-boggling to me the ways this stuff happens. And again, that's part of the planning. So the data breach avoidance plan, when I put that together, you sit down and you say, okay, what industry are you in? What laws apply? Let's talk about how you're locked down. Let's talk about your IT cybersecurity company. I would say at least 50% of the time, my recommendation is find somebody else. They have their cousin Bob or niece Jane working on their system, or they've got the local IT guy who's great about setting up a computer, but he doesn't know anything about cyber. And so we lock you down, we get you the right insurance, we have an incident response plan because you don't want to build a bridge while the fire's going. So this is what we do if something happens. And then the tech policy is huge. And that's basically, hey, what's your bring your own device policy? Can you work from home? What's the password policy? What's the computer use policy? And then ongoing training. And when you put all this together, again, it locks you down so that you've minimized the chance something's going to happen and you've maximized the response to hopefully impact you the least. Because it's always hard and it's always difficult. But if you got the insurance in place, your financial limitation is $5 or $10,000 usually. They'll hire the attorney to come in and do all the work. They'll hire the forensics to come in and do the work. So yeah, it's impactful, but it's not going to close your business and it's not going to cost you hundreds of hours. Whereas if you don't have any of that, It's crazy. Yeah.
And that was my first question when I got the call from a friend of mine. I said, well, you have cybersecurity, right? And he said, no. Now he has it, but he's $60,000 into the remediation and he's done everything he has to do. But a lot of that, it could have been $10,000 or $5,000, like you said. So People need to know. Like, I just am fortunate because all I do is study the business of law. So when I go to these
Right.
conferences, I'm kind of like on the leading edge of a lot of this stuff.
Sure.
And the people that are not, that just are busy making doing the thing, right?
Yeah.
They're not aware of what can go sideways. Once it goes sideways, like there's an untold cost too. Like, he's an older guy that's a friend of mine.
Mhm.
And he was like, I'm ready to hang it up. Like, I
Yeah.
can't take this kind of stress. I've done well. And I'm like, man, it really impacted him. Like, he was like, I'm just trying to get through the day. And this is the nightmare that my life has become, but we live in a complex world.
Yeah, well, it's like you said. I mean, most lawyers, you're the leading edge of this, but you see this all the time. Lawyers are busy being lawyers, right? And so a lot of lawyers form a law firm because they didn't like where they were, or they don't have options, or for a lot of reasons, they think they're going to get rich, but they don't know how to run a law firm because nobody teaches that stuff in law school. And so they're having a hard time, but they figured it out, right? So they know a little bit of marketing. They're figuring it out. They're making some money, but they're so busy practicing law and so busy trying to juggle all those plates. You throw a cybersecurity incident in the mix because they didn't think about it. And that's when it all comes, like your buddy, it comes all crashing down. He's like, well, maybe it's time for me just to stop.
Right. And
But that's sad.
Listen,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things you can pick up because you like it, right? Like, you can pick up marketing, like you
Yeah.
said, or you could pick up trial work. You can pick up a lot of different components that you didn't learn in law school. Cybersecurity ain't one of them. That's my opinion. Like, I don't have the technical expertise that somebody in that world has. So, I'm pretty sure that any IT provider you're talking to, they should have that knowledge, but I get it. The small ones don't, right? He had a local IT guy that had zero cybersecurity knowledge. So, like, as you're telling the story, I'm like, yep, that's what happened. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, they just don't. I mean, because it's a different world. So I've got a buddy of mine who was my IT guy when I launched in 2012 as a solo, and he was a former client of mine. I helped him out with some stuff, and he's an IT guy. And so he was my IT guy. And we eventually outgrew him, not because of his knowledge base, but just because we had 3 offices and we had all these people and he's a small shop. But I work with him for his smaller client. He's got certain clients. And so when I was working with him, it was really interesting is he was taking over for this one particular company, and the existing IT, they had an incident, right? And so he was trying to get that client to come to me to do the planning, and they didn't want to spend the money and they didn't want to spend the time. He's like, okay. So he did what he could do, but he was working to switch them over to do all this sort of stuff. Well, before he could do all that work, they had an incident, turned out to be a breach. And then it turns out when we're doing the forensics work to figure out what was impacted, because that's part of what you have to do is, hey, was there any personal information at risk? In which case we have to do all these notifications and do all sort of this stuff.
Right.
But to do that, you need to do, so we went out and hired a forensics team, and they came in and luckily they had some insurance. Great. Not a great insurance. I won't name the company, but they've been a nightmare. So we're working through this stuff, and their IT guy didn't click a button to allow a certain amount of logging and audit. So when this forensics team did all this work, they go, hey, we can't tell you anything that happened past a week. Sorry. So now that company has to data mine the entire system because we can't tell what they accessed. So now this has turned what should have been a relatively small issue. Luckily, they have insurance, but it's going to go from probably would have been a $5,000 or $10,000 cost, honestly, for the forensics to $50,000, $60,000 for data mining, all because their IT guy didn't hit a button because he didn't know.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah, it is.
Quick break to thank the sponsors of the podcast. This episode is supported by Tona Law, a modern law firm built on integrity and innovation. Learn how they're changing the game at tonalaw.com. Attorney referrals accepted from across the country. You'll see what it's like when you send us a case. You'll have some happy clients. So I know that without getting too deep in it, there are certain core cybersecurity infrastructure things that you recommend in that guide.
Yeah.
Essential tools, right?
Sure.
So break down essential tools for anybody that has interest in hearing the different tools they should be discussing with their cybersecurity person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then we'll keep it super high level, right?
Yep.
I promise not to get too geeky, too techie here.
Right.
So the bottom line, look, everybody hears about a firewall, right? So you want a firewall, but one of the things you want is you want a commercial firewall. So the difference is don't go get a Netgear or something off the shelf. You want to get something like a Cisco router. And this is a physical device that runs the internet through your office. And the reason why we like these commercial devices is they're networked. So your IT cybersecurity people can access them remotely and make sure what's going on. And the Cisco Meraki systems, which is what we have here and what I like, is if there's an event in Malaysia for some new attack and Cisco patches it, that patch goes to every device in the world. And so it happens automatically. And so it elevates the level. Now, as always, it's going to cost more, right? You have to subscribe to it. Everything's subscription, right? You buy the device and you have to subscribe.
Right.
It's one of these things you got to do. Multi-factor authentication we talked about, you have to do it on everything. You just have to. It's super important to do. There's a couple of other things that people don't necessarily do. So you've got the computer, fine. You want to have what's called EDR, or endpoint detection response. So what this is it's machine learning. Now they put everything's got AI, right? But it was machine learning. Now they've got AI into it. And it just sits on your systems and it basically analyzes, millions of points of data. So it says, hey, this program is a little weird. That shouldn't be running. Or you normally don't download 5 gigabytes of data at 2 a.m, and that'll trigger an alarm. And so it's basically monitoring all of your systems to see if anything unusual happens, to try to catch it, flag it, stop it. And then that's oftentimes tied, which again, I recommend, which is a SOC, or Security Operations Center. And that is a human manned facility 24/7. So at 2 a.m, if your EDR catches something and says, hey, this is weird, it notifies the SOC. A human being can go, oh, that's odd, and turn off your internet or do X, Y, and Z because your IT company is not working at 2 a.m. on Friday, Saturday morning. And so that's that. And then the key critical one that a lot of companies don't do yet is called conditional access policy. All this is you're setting up a condition that has to be met before somebody can access your data. What we do at our firm is the only way that you can access our data. So we have all of our client data is in our practice management system, but you access that through the internet. But we also have all of our firm data, and all of our numbers and archived clients are all sitting on a SharePoint folder, which is Microsoft, and all our emails on Microsoft. But to access these systems, you have to be on a device that we either own or manage. So if I try to access these systems on my wife's computer or a hotel computer, even if I have my password and I can authenticate and multi-factor, it will not let me access it. So you can see how that one simple step pretty much solves most of the issues. The only way that somebody's going to access their data is if they hack my device, which again, remember, my device is protected by this EDR and the SOC. So the chances something's going to happen is pretty low. Now, again, it costs per device, per month, per user. It costs me. So we spend a lot of money on this stuff. But, I run a 37-person shop. It's pennies compared to what would happen if I had a breach. So these are all things that when you have a communication, and, I talk about it in my guide is, when you talk to your IT cyber company, you should be asking them some of these things. And if they look at you blankly, that's a good sign that you might need somebody else. What's a conditional access policy? Okay, I should know more about this than you, right?
Right. Listen, I can't wait till we're done recording this. I'm shooting it right over to my COO to make sure that we've got everything. Again, I am so paranoid that I would rather have everything locked down than have one. I don't want it to be easy. So I would have multi-factor authentication on everything and enforced, right? It's just too risky. There's just too many bad actors out there. And it just one simple click of the button changes the game, not in your favor, right?
It literally takes one employee clicking one link one time can give them the keys to the kingdom if you don't have the right stuff in place.
So let's talk about that, because to me, I think that's the biggest thing, right? The human element that I can't control. And I remember back in the day, people were storing passwords on spreadsheets. And I was like,
right.
And then I look at the passwords and go, are you kidding me? It might as well just be password, right? Now we've gotten far more sophisticated over the years and we use password keepers and all of that. But talk about the human element, because that's always the wild card, right? You have policies, you create training, you have a culture, but if you don't have consistent accountability check-ins, right, and audits, that's where I find a lot of policies fall to the wayside. So talk about the human element and what you recommend.
Yeah, sure. So, you do start with the policies, right? Because we've said that before. If you don't have a policy, there is one. You just don't know what it is. So
correct.
Have what I call firm tech policy. So spell it out. This is, we use a password manager, and I recommend password managers. That's another really good one. But we use password managers. Or if you don't have a password manager, this is our password policy. It's a passphrase. It's got to be this long. You don't store it anywhere. Whatever the policies are, come up with good ones and then put that as part of their employee handbook. You have them sign off. This is our policy. This is what you agree to do. Understanding sometimes they're not going to do it. Sometimes you're going to have bad employees that don't do it on purpose, which hopefully isn't often. But a lot of times it's just how people get lazy. They forget about it, or they're tired, or they get busy, or they make a mistake. So you have the policies, you train on the policies, you frequently remind them of what the policies are, and then you also make sure you have frequent testing and training. So as part of what we use an IT cybersecurity company, and as part of that, what we pay them to do, they have basically fake phishing emails that are sent to our firm to test our people to see if they'll click a link. We have quarterly training that every employee has to take and then signs off in a certificate that they took that training. And it's very basic training, all right? Everyone here takes it. I take it. It's like, okay, I got it. But believe it or not, even if it's stupid and even if it's so basic, it just reminds you, oh yeah. So the next time you get a fake email, you're like, oh, I remember that now. And I forgot the statistic, but I think it's 20 or 30% increase in awareness once they take this kind of training because it just keeps it top of mind. But you have all of that in place. And then part of it is you want to, just like what you said is, hey, I lock everything down. I have multi-factor on everything. You're going to get a little bit of, especially if you don't have this in place now, you're going to get some pushback because it's not as easy and it's not as convenient and people don't like change. I got it. And matter of fact, I just got an email from that IT friend of mine. He's got a client that is, after some time, is finally coming around to talk to me. And he said, look, I'm forwarding this email where one of their employees just complained to their COO about these tech policies and it's inconvenient. And they were like, this is why we have to have the conversation because they don't understand why it's important. So if you educate them, you have the policies, you train on it, and then you lock your systems down. So the way our system is set up, if one of my people clicks a link they shouldn't click, we have the protections built in to where it takes it to a sandbox first. So even if they were to click a bad link, my system's going to catch it and it won't let them go to the bad place because it'll say, hey, this is a bad place. So we try to protect them as much as possible because nobody's perfect and humans are, fallible. But we training them, telling them how important it is, sort of the carrot and stick. The stick is, hey, this is part of your employment. And if we have people that refuse to do the training or we have people that fail the training all the time, or if we've counseled them and they still don't follow it, then we separate. I'm like, look, if you can't follow it, my firm is worth more than you. So
right.
You're not going to burn it to the ground around me, man. I can't have that.
Right. And you're feeding 37 families. That's what people have to understand,
For sure.
So let's talk about incident response and cyber insurance, a specific component of this podcast, which is you can get it, like as Elon Musk said about fraud. You can do everything you can to mitigate it, but you can't get it to zero. Right. And so scary prospect when you think about law firms and the number of people that work there. But God forbid a breach occurs in somebody's firm. Walk us through the steps of, what happens, how it gets detected, and then what the best practices are from there right away.
Sure. So usually, it's going to be one of two things to detect it. It's either going to be you as the law firm figure out something's weird, or if you've got a good cybersecurity IT company, they let you know something's happened. And it can go either way. So if the IT company lets you know something's happened, then what you do, so my clients, I sit on top as sort of a breach coach, right? So I'm the guy. So what happens is when something happens, if it comes from the IT company, they let the law firm know, the law firm tells me right away. What I do is I then call their cyber insurance, we tell the cyber insurance people right away because every policy says, hey, you need to let us know right away so we'll cover. And if you wait too long, then they're not going to cover it. Right. So you want to let them know, we think something's happened. Here's what we're going to do. If you're the law firm and you find that this is weird, and sometimes it's like, oh, we think something happened, but it's not, it's user error or it's false alarm. But you then should reach out to your IT cyber company. Again, you should have a good one. And you should reach out to them and go, hey, this is weird. This has happened. And we had that recently at our firm where my COO got an email. It was actually one of the most sophisticated email phishing schemes that my IT cyber people have seen. Basically, the bad guys spoofed my email, spoofed conversations with me about, it was a coach from New York, actually. It was like, oh, so glad that you did the coaching, blah, blah, blah. So glad that we could be helped. Here's our invoice for $8,000 or whatever it was. And there was this long purported chain of emails between me and this company. And they looked all very legitimate. And it was sent to my COO and said, hey, Kellam asked me to send this for payment. And my COO sent it to me and said, hey, I didn't know anything about this coaching. What is about this? And I go, yeah, that's not a thing. And then I was really worried because she didn't get my email response. And it looked like somebody had changed the rule of her email account. I'm like, they got into her email. So it was this whole thing. And it turned out to be sort of a false alarm because they didn't change a rule in her email. It turned out to be that she coincidentally had accidentally labeled me as spam 3 weeks before, which made it go into her. But it looked like, because I'm like, wait, if they changed the rule, they got into her email. But long story short is it was this whole thing. And my COO is sophisticated and we're sophisticated. She wasn't just going to go spend $8,000 without talking to me. But it was this whole thing basically that we had to get into it. And what are we going to do? But I immediately, when I figured it out, I reached out to my cyber IT company and I go, hey, look into this. And then their tech people looked into it and then they escalated it to their cybersecurity forensics people to make sure that our systems were secure. So basically you do that, you let the insurance company know. And usually what happens from that point on is most cybersecurity policies will let you have your own counsel if approved by them. So most of these counsel, they sit, these big firms, they sit on the insurance panel, they're pre-approved. I don't sit on any panels. But if I have a client that I'm their cyber cyber guy because I do yearly planning and I'm their guy sort of as a general counsel for cyber. Usually and again, the policies that I put them with allow me to act as counsel. I've worked with these policies. They normally don't blink an eye. But sometimes I've got clients that they say, no, either we're not going to let you, or there are some policies that say you have to use our people. But either way, counsel will get involved. We will then work with, usually, even if you have got a good cybersecurity IT company like we have, a lot of times, they don't necessarily have the depth and breadth of the actual forensics work because that's a different skill set. So we will go out and hire a forensics team. They will evaluate what's going on. Then sometimes we have to do data mining to figure out, okay, we know they accessed this data or they might have accessed this data. Now we have to sort through that data to see if there's any private and personal information or personal health information, depending on the laws. And once you do all of that, God forbid there's a breach, which means there was PII or PI or PHI or PI, then we have to do notifications. And you've got to send out letters a certain way. You might have to let credit agencies know. You might have to do free credit reporting. You might have to load an agency. Like if it's HIPAA, you got to let HHS know there's an investigation. I'm doing one of those now. I've got some government clients and we're doing an HHS investigation now that's going to be a nightmare. So that's sort of the breadth, right? But it all comes back to making sure you have the planning, you have the people. And honestly, it's not more important than planning, but insurance is such a big factor because then they're going to write the check.
I still can't believe any law firm, I don't care how big you are,
yeah,
any law firm, you should have cyber insurance at this point.
And it's for $1 million, a good policy. And it might not even be $3,000. It's $3,000 for us because of our size and complexity, but $3,000 for $1 million is not a lot for insurance. And it's a great policy. They're going to cover anything we've got, and they'll cover fines, the investigation, notification, attorney's fees. They'll cover fines if you're fined. They'll cover business interruption. You name it, they're going to cover it up to your limit.
Right. Yeah, please, if anybody's listening to this, you got to get with a broker, get a good insurance policy.
Yeah.
I know there's a wide variety. Do you do, as part of your thing, where you'll review people's policies to see if it fits one you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share the 3 companies that I like the most. I'm happy to share. I like Collation, CFC, and At Bay. Those are just 3. And there's other good ones out there, but those are the 3 that we use Collation here. But all 3 of those companies, they've got good language. Their exclusions are reasonable. The companies are good to work with. I found them to be very responsive and responsible. I think they're good stewards. But yeah, so those 3 are good. And then, make sure that your business insurance person knows cybersecurity because a lot of times they don't. And I'm happy to give, I've got a guy that he's got an agency that does most states. So it's always good to have somebody that knows what they're talking about when it comes to these things as well.
Yeah, the more resources you can share, the better, because I have a great insurance broker.
Yeah.
I still had to be proactive in saying I want a separate cybersecurity policy. It's different from that broker, from a business owner's policy, the BOP policies that are out there.
Yeah, a lot of times they're like, oh, we'll get you an endorsement. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably not going to be enough. Right, and so, again, you kind of figure this out. But yeah, so I do that review as well as a lawyer. So generally what I do is I package it. So a company will hire me and I'll do the data breach avoidance plan, the incident response plan, the tech policy, all 3 of those together. And part of the data breach avoidance plan is the insurance component. And so I put all that together. I flat fee it. I always say the cost of that depends on 3 things: how big you are, how complex you are, and how screwed up you are, right? Because then depending on those 3, it depends on how much more work I have to do.
Right.
Because that's really consulting and not legal. I actually, like I said, I work with companies all over the United States on that stuff.
All right. Top 3 to 5 actions a law firm should take right now.
Sure. So right now, number 1, you should make sure you have competent IT cybersecurity help. Make sure if you've got somebody in-house, make sure they have that skill set. If you use a vendor, make sure they have that skill set. That's just critical because then they're going to be able to lock you down. Secondly, I would say is make sure you have the right insurance in place. Third, whether it's me or somebody else, I think you should hire a cybersecurity attorney to help you with the planning, which will help you with these 2 things. Because that's a lot of times what'll happen is I will come in, and unfortunately, a lot of times I'm hired after something's happened, right? They didn't have the foresight. Yeah. And I feel bad. And I never say I told you so, but there's not a small amount of people that I've talked to. They've chosen not to pay me. Something happens. They come back to me and I'm like, yeah, I'm happy to help. And it's going to cost you now this much versus this much. But what I will say is, as part of the package is, if you haven't had anything in place and you hire somebody to do this kind of planning, planning, that's part of it is, hey, I will help you find the IT company. I will help you find the insurance company. And what I always say, and I know, Tom, I listen to your podcast, so I know you've said this before, at the end of the day, time is the most valuable thing we've got. And don't be foolish with spending the money you need to spend to get it done, because your time is more valuable running the firm and practicing law than it is trying to figure out cybersecurity, right?
Well, I would
We're not
also
experts.
add to that, like the recent epiphany I had is as owners of firms, we're often trying to manage things that we have no business trying to manage, right? So
Right.
the lesson I learned with marketing was after burning like $1 million on the wrong vendors, I was like, why am I not hiring a fractional CMO to do vendor selection, management, and accountability?
Right.
So like you're almost playing the role of a fractional CTO, right? A chief technical officer or a fractional CIO, whatever the terminology would be, where
Sure.
or fractional cybersecurity officer, whatever it is, where we have no idea what to look for. Like I'm lucky I have somebody in-house who's very strong on the tech side, who's still getting a copy of this podcast, because this is the stuff that keeps people up at night, or it should, if they know better. If they
Right.
know better. But yeah, I think it's always going to be more cost effective to be proactive than reactive. The last thing you
Right.
want is to have to call you with oh my God, I've got a ransomware request for $500,000, right? And they
Yeah.
come, and then what do you do?
Yeah. The other thing I'll say too, Tom, on that is, the one you asked me sort of, top policies and best practices. The other thing I'll say is make sure when you have all your stuff set up and you're locked down, but make sure that you have backups and make sure you test the backups and make sure that your backups aren't still connected to the system. And so what I mean by that is I've had clients that had backups, they got a ransomware, they go, oh, it's okay, we have backups. And then that's when they figure out the backups hadn't worked for 6 months. And then you're stuck, right? Because then you have to pay the ransom to get the data back. Or I've had a client that had a backup, they were testing the backups, that's fine, but their IT vendor wasn't great. And their IT vendor, basically, it was connected. So when somebody got into the system and the encryption happened, it also went upstream and encrypted their backups.
Oh.
And that can happen, right? It's literally just a couple of settings. And so these are all very important things. But I will tell the FBI says don't do this. As a cybersecurity attorney, I'll say this too. If you can get the data back, don't pay the ransom, because they've probably already sold the data anyway. It's probably already on the dark web. But sometimes you don't have a choice. If you can't get that data back any other way, you don't really have a choice. And the FBI says that too. We don't recommend that you pay these people. We don't pay criminals. But if you need the data, you really don't have a choice.
Oh, listen, man, we're living in complex times, right?
I know. Well, I will say, by the way, if you've got good cyber insurance too, they will pay the ransom. That's part of what the coverage is. They will pay the ransom to recover the data if needed.
Right, which is what happened in that first instance I was telling you about with the New York firm. But
The 500, yeah.
Yeah, man. But again, who knows the limits of the policy, whether it covered downtime and lost revenue and all of that other stuff. So,
or are they going to fight you and you have to prove it? I mean, that's the thing, right? Yeah, it's on there, and then they go, prove your losses.
Right.
Now you got to hire an expert accountant, and they're going to fight with you. It happens.
Right. Yeah, it's an insurance company. They're not in the business of happily paying any claims.
Wait, really?
So-
I didn't know that. I was this year. I was this many years old.
I was today years old when I learned that, right?
Right, exactly.
Listen, Kellam, again, you were hyper responsive when I called you for my friend, because I got your name from John Hawkins. I called John right away. And where can people find you?
Yeah, my website, pzlaw.com. I know on the show notes, you're going to put a link to the guide.
Yep.
And I just have a download page. You guys can just put in your name and email, and I'll shoot you the guide. And then if you reach out to me, I'll also give you the AI policy guide. I don't have a download for that yet, but if you just email me, I'm happy to send it right over.
I would love to put that in the resource notes too, because the number of people that I was shocked. I was in a room with like a dozen law firm owners, and they're like, oh, I don't have an AI policy. It's not in my retainer. And I was like,
wait, what? I know.
Yeah, exactly.
I know.
And
It's so bad.
they're talking about using it for discovery, for trial prep. And I'm like,
right.
It makes my chest contract.
I know. You're like, oh, I heard. Oh, I'm worried for you.
I think that as you start to realize, like, the cost is nominal for the return on investment, that on a go forward, you have everything kind of done the right way, right?
I think that's critical. So obviously, we own our own firms and we're very active in the business of law. And that's, much like you, that's what I enjoy most. But when I practice, I do the cyber. But yeah, that's a couple of years ago, I started my own coaching company called The Motivated Lawyer, where Motivate's an acronym. And that's part of what I'm doing is educating people on the tech and the AI. The other thing that I'll give you to put in the show notes is I do a free newsletter every Tuesday, email that I send out to people where I talk about a business principle, but I talk about practical AI tip and AI news. So every week I'm trying to educate on AI because people don't know about it, they don't use it, and I want people to use it responsibly and best practices, right? I think it's critical.
Yeah. Oh, listen, I'll sign up for that right away. Like as much information as you can get because the technology is changing by the day, by the hour. It's moving so fast.
It's crazy.
And AI is built to evolve that fast. They're supercomputers at this point, right? So you either got to keep up or you're going to get run over is how I feel about it.
Or retire like your buddy, right?
Right.
Or you just get to, I'm done, right?
Right. You just get to the point where you're like, literally, I felt so bad. Guy lost a week of sleep over it. He was sick about it.
Sure.
So listen, man, I appreciate you coming on. To me, it's an important message. And hopefully if people are listening to this, it motivates them to just pick up the phone and say, hey, can we do a consultation?
Absolutely. I'm always happy to talk to people. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Yeah. And again, thanks for coming on and giving us your time. Like it's an important message.
Hey, Tom, appreciate you inviting me. I had a good time. Thanks.
Kellam, thank you, buddy. Thank you for listening to this episode of Lead Counsel Podcast. Your host, Tom Tona. Go anywhere podcasts are distributed. Follow us. Leave us a 10-star review. Share some episodes with your friends. And thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you. This episode is sponsored by Tona Law. They're not just another law firm. They're defining what it means to fight for their clients. We get a lot of attorney referrals from across the country. We pay fee participation in all jurisdictions where it's permitted. We focus on integrity, innovation, and relentless advocacy. Tona Law is proving that the business of the law can scale without losing its heart. If you want to see how a modern firm is built for impact and happy client referrals, check out tonalaw.com. Mention again the Lead Counsel Podcast, and I'm happy to get on the phone with you.